So today we are talking about the dark side of watercolor, and I am not a glass half empty kind of gal. I'm a glass half full. It might be a little negative to talk about things that might not be beautiful and full of sprinkles and rainbows and all the things with watercolor, although I do believe that watercolor has an amazing ability to lift your mood and lower your anxiety and all this stuff. But there are 3 things I wanted to mention today, just kind of to pump the brakes a little. If you're new to watercolor, I don't want you to learn about them and be discouraged later. So before we get into that, I do want to show you a sneak preview. We are actually doing a landscape today. I never do landscapes on this channel. In the past, I got very few views, which should not be my motivation for painting, but the audience kind of told me what they wanted to see and I went for it. So we're trying something new today. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more landscapes. But let's get into it, guys. I'm excited to paint with you today. So friends, for our supplies today, I have this professional watercolor paper. It is by Meeden. You can see it linked below in the description. I don't use professional paper all the time. I will say it over and over, and we're talking about that today a little bit too. This is a pulp paper. It's very cheap, but it's 140 pounds like this paper. It's got some nice texture. And this one, I'll try to link it below as well. It's Handbook Journal Company. That's the original, what we're kind of emulating today. But for all professional purposes, I'm using the cotton paper today, but you certainly don't have to. You can do it on the pulp paper as I showed you. We are going to need some masking tape. This is a pretty thick one, and it still works for our purposes. So if I could ever get this off of here, we're just going to quickly add a nice border. I love a good border for my landscapes. I find that you've just got those beautiful crisp and clean edges. Now make sure that it is properly sealed down, or else you might get some issues with some paint slipping underneath. And you know, you don't want that, but if it happens, which it did happen to me in another painting, it's okay. It's not the end of the world, right? We're just practicing, we're playing today, we're having fun. Today the palette we're using is by Paul Rubens, and this is a beautiful palette that they actually gifted to me. If you want to see it, it's linked below as well, and there's a special discount code, so that's pretty exciting. We're testing that out today, and I have my water jar, I've got my paper towel, I've got my 2 brushes. This is a 12 and this is an 8. So it's kind of the typical brushes I always use. I have another paper towel because we're gonna do some paper towel clouds. And then let's spray down. If you got a spray bottle, spray down your paint. I thought it was kind of interesting that when I used this and everything dried, it kind of like started flaking a little bit. But if you spray it again, it reactivates, melts down with the water, and you can reuse it. So you know, every palette is different. I thought it was quite a pleasant palette. When I used it, you can see that I've used it before. I know today we've got some things we're talking about, but let's get into our painting experience first. So we have our border up. We are ready for our sky. We're just gonna try to do a very simple and pretty quick watercolor painting. So don't belabor anything, just kind of work fairly quickly and don't worry about the end result. Wetting our number 12 round brush. Now I don't wet my sky first. I just kind of go for the color. So I like to do dark at the top. So I'm grabbing some of that dark blue, and I just start putting on that paper, that paint. And we want it to be a little bit darker here. We're just gonna bring it down towards about halfway-ish as we chat. I'm gonna grab some more other types of blue, and we can make it a little bit lighter as we go down. So just have fun. Dip, grab some water, spread that out. You can leave some white space if you dare, if you desire. And so, you know, the first thing about watercolor that I think it's really important to talk about when we talk about that sort of the dark side, and I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad or whatever, but it's just like reality of this space, watercolor space. The reality there is that it is quite competitive. If you look at social media, we're gonna take our paper towel, we're gonna rip this in half. We're gonna just start dabbing out some clouds. Like social media, we compare ourselves to each other's work. It's really hard not to get discouraged. So take your finger, put it right there, and we're going to just dab some cloud shapes. So if you do this right away, you're gonna be able to lift a lot of color, not everything, but just do the best you can. I'm actually gonna take my finger out of there and go like this. I can see that right now some of this paint is very staining, so it's not lifting up as well as I would like, but that's okay. We've got some weird stuff here. We can actually, we'll keep working with it, you guys. We're gonna work with it. I'm just gonna keep dabbing here, creating some of these billowy clouds and a few over here as well. If it gets too dirty, just get a new clean space piece and just keep dabbing, okay? So dab, dab, dab. You don't want it to dry before you've done the marks you want it to do. I'm gonna wet this and see what happens. So some colors are more staining than others. I'm actually gonna swirl this, see if I could lift a little bit. That looks kind of funny. So we're just gonna go with it, because we can always come back in and add some more blue or some gray. And you know what? Let's just leave it. So we've got this billowy sky that's coming out. I actually want to do a little bit more right here if I can. All right, just some quick clouds just for some fun. And we're gonna leave it like that. I'm gonna see if I can do a little lifting. So I'm gonna take my number 6, dab my brush. And you can sometimes scrub and grab some of that paint. If you can't, you know what? Take some more blue paint. So this is all a learning experience, okay? And put some back in there. I didn't like how it was all just these little like finger tips prints, right? So you can go back in, you can add in some more blue over that and kind of cover up some of those things. If you want to do a little bit more experimenting, see if you can lift some of that, you know, just play around. This is supposed to be fun time. It's supposed to be simple, and we're not going to belabor it too much. We're just going to kind of leave it. We're going to actually save a little space for the ocean water, and we're going to do what will be our sand. So big brush again. So just talking about, it's very competitive in this field. I'm going to grab some yellow. I'm going to grab some brown, and I'm just going to do a very light layer of color, okay, for my sand. And just reserve some space for the water. And so when you go and scroll on social media, you're gonna see a lot of things. You're gonna see things that are inspiring, but then you're gonna compare your work to others, and it's gonna be depressing at times. Don't allow yourself to get to that space where you're like, yours is better than my work, and my work is, you know, inferior. Let's go ahead and grab some browns, a little bit of brown, and just sort of pop in wet on wet, a little bit of some texture, maybe some little mounds where there's dirt or whatever. Just really abstract, you know. We've got the tape there. It's gonna serve its purpose. A little yellow too, okay? So, you know, there's also this idea that some people are schooled, right? And other people are not, and they're self-taught. I am the self-taught. And sometimes we get into this space where one is better than the other. And so I don't want you to get stuck in that world, because that sucks you in a bad way. Let's just keep popping in different colors. And I want you to think about, what is it that you have to bring to the table when it comes to your art? If you start to focus on other people and what they're saying and doing, you're going to get caught up in that perfectionistic world, and you think that your art needs to be a certain way. But focus on you. That's my biggest first tip. Focus on you and your progress and your growth. How are you changing and getting better? Let's go ahead and dry this. We'll come back and start adding our other layers. So now I'm going to take my number 8 round brush, and I'm going to be looking for a nice turquoisey color, so I can kind of test out and see, okay, I've got like a navy here, got those beautiful blues, I've got some of this kind of teal color, and so I'm actually going to take some of the teal, and now look at that pretty color. That's making a beautiful turquoise. So we're going to do our horizon line, and I'm going to get very quiet so that I can concentrate on what I'm doing. So just straight across, as straight as you can, but don't worry too much. So I do really quick brush strokes there, and then I'm going to dab my brush, and we're just going to go back over and just almost dry brush some of this back and forth, where you're going to see some white space coming through, some of those beautiful reflections on the water. You know, just really simple, easygoing. You know, we're not thinking too much about this. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is watercolor is just expensive, and let's take off some of that paint and dab it. And you know, it might not be news to you that it's expensive, but if you're just starting out and you're thinking you've got to have the best supplies, it can get very, very daunting. And I know art supplies are expensive in general, but you know, if you're looking at that, you know, you can get a cheap canvas if you're doing acrylic, for example. And honestly, you know, I enjoy a cheap canvas and working on it with cheap paint. You just have to add more layers because it's not as pigmented, but you can get away with that. I think with watercolor, it's a little bit harder to get away with that because with, well, watercolor paper, there's cotton and it looks a certain way. And then there's the pulp, the cheaper, that looks a certain way. And so you start to get in this mindset that you have to, everything has to be what you think you need. And maybe you don't, but people start to tell you that. Let's go ahead and start adding in some things here on the shoreline. I want to start with adding in some lighter green. And so I've got this beautiful green right here, and I'm just swirling the brush around. I've got some brown, and that's going to mute it a little bit too, but I've got that smaller brush. If you want to use a small detail brush, you can, but you really don't have to. A little bit more brown. Oops, so that just came out. Stay in there, buddy. We don't want you to jump ship just yet. There we go. All right. So I just want to make them look a little bit less intense and bright. So what I want to do is just start doing some flick motions from the bottom up, kind of like this, you know, making some diagonal shapes. I'm actually going to go in just this direction down here. So like maybe we've got a little bit of a hill here where we've got some of our greenery. And then I'm going to do some over here too, some long ones. So I'm not saying, we're just going to, you know, just keep following the path that I'm doing right here. We're just going to add in some really beautiful grasses in a light green. And then we'll continue by adding some other types of colors for our grasses as well. And you can go from the top down, but you can see that I get a thinner pointy mark when I go and I do the flick of the brush. And if you want a thinner brush, you know, you can do that. You can use that. It's going to, like, see, for example, I've got this liner brush here. If you do this, it's going to give you those nice thin marks that maybe you're looking for. So you can switch over if you have one. I'm just going to switch over for now because I have it. And that's going to give you those really lovely thinner grass pieces that you're probably desiring, but it's not necessary. You can do this with any brush that you have. And so, you know, thinking about it, especially at the watercolor world, when people say you must use 100% cotton, and it's like, yes, I agree that it typically gives you a better kind of perspective on it. Like maybe your end result feels more polished or professional, but I use the cheap stuff too. And I even paint on the backside of my paper as well. So it's like, you know, just being aware that there's really good quality, and then there's some things, so you can look at some videos to see what people recommend. There's some supplies that, you know what, there's some really good student grade out there, and it could be just as good. If your budget doesn't allow you to do a whole bunch of expensive, you know, supplies, just save up for a couple things at a time. And use what you've got, but the mentality is going to be most important. And I thought when I was starting to paint, I was like, man, if I had the right supplies, then I would just be so much better. And then I realized it's really, I just needed to get better for me, for my paintings to look better. But yes, supplies do matter. But the lack of anxiety when you're painting with something you feel comfortable with, where you're not breaking your budget, that's super valuable. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I'm going to do a darker now for some shadow. So dabbing my brush, I've got a nice little navy, and we're just going to kind of run along the bottom here, adding in some little shadow marks as well. Because you're going to have a lot of shadows on if it's a sunny day or whatnot. You want to add in some darkness. Just really loose, really easy going. If you do have budget issues and you're just wanting to save some money, you can recycle, you can paint on the back side of paper. You can cut up your sheets into smaller sheets. You can get some cheaper paper and just practice your heart out. Allow yourself to, you know, be okay with using the expensive when you're okay with it, and then using the cheaper if you're okay with it too. And that's with paper, with paint as well. I just want you to paint. Does that make sense? Just paint. Don't worry so much. All right, so let's clean our brush, dab it on the paper towel, and then I want to just spread out some of this shadowy part right here in the bottom, just like that, and then it's kind of giving us this look of, you know, like it's kind of like a little hill it's going down right there. Can spread out this one too, just at an angle, little mounds here. Remember, this is not going to be perfect, it's just going to be fun. The whole point is to have fun. And then the third thing I wanted to talk about in the dark side of watercolor is that it can be very snooty, if you haven't noticed that. And that's, I understand that's everywhere, but I think I get really frustrated when I hear people say over and over, like, you must use this, you must use that. And because, you know, people get so stressed out about being told that. And I think that, you know, I kind of have a real problem with that because people need to use what they feel comfortable with. But I get it. We need to make suggestions and people like to know. But not everyone is going to want to use the same type of thing. Not everyone is going to be comfortable with the same type of products. Let's go ahead and, well, we'll dry this in a second. I want to actually add a little more of that kind of turquoisey moment. That's so pretty. Just a little extra here over the top just to darken up that horizon. If you feel like you want to add in some like kind of brush strokes over the top just to give a little extra texture, it's a good time to do that. Allow your brush to sort of run out and get that dry brush happening. It's always very beautiful to have that texture. And let's dry this, and then we're going to add in some more of our green. All right, still that smaller, well, the smaller brush if you want to. I actually want to add in some brown in the atmosphere here, kind of around the plants. So I'm going pretty concentrated, just grabbing some of that paint and then just adding in some little lines over the shadowy bits. Maybe those are rocks or who knows what, just part of the ground. So grabbing that. As everything is dry now. Always make sure that you dry things properly. If you don't dry in between layers, you're going to have a lot of these layers just kind of melding into each other, and that can be very frustrating when you're trying to build up your layers. So make sure that they're completely dry. So yeah, I think one of the things with that snootiness of watercolor is that there's this idea of purism or purists who think you can't mix media together. So you can't take, you know, white gouache paint and add that in with your watercolor or using acrylic on top or beside it. And I just think that that is so limiting. So if you feel like you're in that snooty world, you know, if you feel like you've experienced that, and I don't think it's all of watercolor, I don't think it's everyone, but I think that some people get caught up in that of kind of telling people like this is how it must be. So I'm not trying to tell you how to do things on this channel. I'm trying to offer suggestions, but like very open to what you decide to do. If you want to go, and I really encourage people to do their own thing and kind of go off on their own intuition when they start to paint and like really enjoy the process. You know, you want to change the colors of things that you're seeing in the tutorial, the colors or the shapes or maybe where things are placed. I'm like, go for it. It makes it your own. And that's really important. All right, I am grabbing this green again and I'm going to add a little puddle here. We are getting close to being done with this pretty simple painting often. And I'm going to take some navy. You can take some black if you want, just a dark, dark blue, something that will really give us a nice kind of darker shadowy green to go on top of what we have here to create some contrast. Now that looks too blue. Grabbing more green. It's actually pretty nice, I think. So I've got my liner, but you can use the liner or you can continue to use the other brush. And we're just going to go over where we went, not covering everything, but you know, just loosely putting on those marks to create those beautiful grasses that are kind of part of the focal point in a way as well. Just tiny little marks can go wherever you want them. So I think a big thing to remember is with watercolor is that, you know, you are supposed to learn the rules so that you understand how to use it. And then you can learn to break them. And that's the big piece of it. That's really helpful. And I do have a video on that actually, like how to learn the rules so you can break them. It's more like, you know, being able to then go off onto your own creative intuition and just play and have fun. And that's the big point. This is all for you to relax. Well, that's my point, to relax and do some self-care, right? Take some time for you to rejuvenate so you can do all the things, all the taking care of and everything you have to do in your life, with your family, with your job, whoever it is you're taking care of or in charge of. We've got to take care of ourselves. So just flick, getting all these little extra darkness. Now you can see the beautiful contrast that's happening. Now we're getting a little bit more realism. Not that we're looking for realism, because my paintings are very loose, but you're going to get more of that depth that you've probably been craving with your painting experience. Just a little bit here. Just put the grasses wherever you feel it's necessary. You can see all that color just building up and looking super nice. All right, so this is bothering me right here, and I can be honest with you that happens sometimes. I'm just gonna grab some blue paint, and I'm actually just gonna put that over there. So we're just gonna put some sky kind of back into this, because I just think it looked a little weird. And that's okay. And if there's something that you don't like, if you can cover it up, go for it. If you can't, you know, you can embrace it, or you can say, you know what, that was part of a learning experience and process, and maybe next time I won't do it in the same way. I'm gonna keep it like that, I think. So clean, damp brush and just spreading this out. So I do hope that, you know, embracing some of the things that could be a darker side of watercolor, you can embrace how you want to see yourself, and you can do things differently despite how you might see some trends happening. If they're frustrating to you, if they're causing you stress, I don't want that for you. And I do want to encourage you, because watercolor is so light and delightful and beautiful. There's so many beautiful aspects, and I would never, you know, trade anything like for this watercolor experience. I think it would be so sad if I didn't have, well, good grief, Mr. Tape, you didn't really come out very well. I'd be so sad if I had to not do watercolor ever again. So anyway, I hope that some of the things we said together and talked about resonated with you, and now you have a lovely painting. Let me know in comments what your favorite part of this discussion was, or your favorite part of the painting, or any future landscapes you would like to see. All right, my friends, I am so excited that we had this conversation. We got to paint the landscape, and I really hope that you found like this sense of peace and encouragement, and hopefully some comfort that despite some of the things that might not be a wonderful cup of tea, knowing that that's not all there is, right? And you can be encouraged to know that you can figure out what's the mentality you're gonna have when it comes to watercolor, when it comes to your mental health even, when it comes to your self-care routine. So as always, I wanna remind you guys that I've got a free workshop coming up. It is, I'm really excited to paint some lovely things with you guys if you're interested. Ugh. So I wanted to also let you know that I have another free watercolor class coming up this Monday, so click the link to sign up in the description below. We're gonna have so much fun as we always do. And I'm still pushing my art retreat. I have some spots available. We are going to Italy this October. Again, linked below for your information. Thank you so much for watching. And if you'd like to learn more about the things that I wish I knew when I first started watercolor painting, click the video here. And I hope you have so much fun. Talk to you later.